Back with part 2 of our Joust to arcade soundboard transplant into a Williams System 11 Pinbot soundboard. Now this is the factory Pinbot board. I copied this ROM, plugged it into the Joust one. Also went through and depopulated this part of the board. So again, this is the factory Pinbot one, but I made it look like this. All I did was, for all the axial components, I just snipped one leg and lifted them up so that they're out of circuit. This U18 that was flagged bad by some previous tech in our video before, I couldn't tell what it was because there was some tape residue on the label. But actually, if I looked at the Pinbot manual, which has an 11297 part number in it, which I think is incorrect. This is what PinWiki says as well, but they might have just been looking at a manual versus actual experience. This board that came out of my Pinbot, which I believe to be factory because the numbers match, is an 11298. I also have a spare, other than the one that we saw in the video, so a second factory Pinbot board that was an 11298 as well. So there might have been some kind of a switch there during production as well. But the way that this came in handy is U18 on this schematic, the one that I was trying to determine what it was, is actually the CVSD chip, the one that does the speech. Now they must have needed that for Joust 2 Arcade. There's probably more speech sounds in that than there was in a Pinbot. But this chip on a System 11 Pinball is actually located in the sound section of the MPU. Right, so in that other board, I just removed that. It only had the corner soldered in since it was already tested bad. And then underneath here, there's another op amp. I think these are 14, I gotta read them quick, 4158s. So I just took that out too, but then everything else electronically is the same as what we have here. So when I did that, I swapped it into a game and it worked. It booted right up, but the certain sounds were a lot quieter than the others, and when you go into your sound and music test, you can test all of the music first. So we can actually just go to Pinbot here. So I have that board installed already. I don't have a light, so you might not even be able to see anything. It might be so dark. But this is the Joust 2 soundboard. You can kind of tell that I've just lifted the legs on those, pulled out the CVSD at U18, and then that op amp was at U1. So made it just match the Pinbot soundboard. And it would have been a lot easier had I had the schematics for an 11298 board, so I could just check the components compared to what the Joust board had. But not only was the Pinbot manual incorrect in that regard, but I can't find a Joust 2 arcade manual that has any info about the components on the soundboard. So I kind of had to eyeball a lot of it and just kind of see how it looked. But we can boot it up here, and it actually works. You hear the one bong to confirm that the board's working. And again, I guess while it's open, the sound section is kind of this top left corner of the MPU. You can see that we have some sound ROMs there as well. So there's another processor. And then I can't read through the camera, but one of those, I think it's the bottom left chip, is the CVSD for System 11 Pinballs. And the only issue that I had was some of the sounds were super quiet. So if we go into test mode here, so if you've never done test mode either, middle button in the down latched position, then hit advance. That'll bring this test up, but if you keep hitting advance, you're not going to go anywhere because this button's not going to do anything, but you do have to release the middle button to the top position, and then you'll be able to advance. But if you want to go through the music, you don't want to hit advance, you want to hit the actual start button on the front of the cabinet. Then it'll go through and play all the theme songs or music from the game. And on first attempt, this was working fine with the Joust 2 board in there. Some great music in Pinbot 2. I'm gonna bet it's a hell of a lot better than Joust 2 music. That's all of those. And then I'm gonna go back to the advanced button on the coin door. And when you get to the sounds test, it'll play 7 sounds, I think. But when I originally installed this, I'm just gonna advance it so I can talk. when I originally installed that board, all of the sounds tests that we saw just from that last run through were very quiet. You can still hear them, but they're only about half as loud as they should be. And on these soundboards, for Pinbot in particular, there's a mixing pot here, which the later System 11 style boards don't have. And then the way that the later System 11 boards and even some of the early WPC boards for Pinball adjusted for kind of the mixing, because signals do come in from the MPU, and some signals are generated on here, and they have to blend them and put them through the two amplifier channels. But the way that later System 11 and early WPC games did that is there was about 4 or 5 resistor values that were different if you went from one game to the next. And I didn't think that that would be an issue on this board due to the presence of this pot, and I figured that's how they balanced out or mixed the channels together. Well, it still does that. There was one resistor that needed to be changed. Just quick, with a spot check, I noticed that R32 on a Pinbot board was a 2.2 kilo ohm resistor, just quarter watt carbon film. But then on the Joust 2 board, that was actually a 27K. So a pretty big jump, more than 10 times the resistance there. And that's what was making my sound super quiet during the sounds test. It was also quiet. Those sounds were quiet during the game as well, and it was quite unbalanced. So by changing out that resistor, all the sounds are at full volume. And I didn't go through and measure out every resistor. I probably will, because on the board that's in the game, I'll likely go through and just cap it. Peter at Arcade Parts and Repair sells a pretty good cap kit. All of these axial ones, the factory blue Phillips ones, they're junk. So make sure you get all of those. I think these are all 10 at 25, and then there's a couple 100 at 35s. These were 470 at 16, and these are 1,000 at 25. All right, so this board's already been capped. With those, I'll probably buy another kit. That's what the sticker's for. And what the hell, it must have been 420, so 2020. This is what I did right when COVID happened, evidently. So, again, hopefully this helps you out. Maybe you can get your Pinbot up and running if you have a Joust 2 soundboard on hand.